Hi, Foggy here, reading my own fic Accidental Time Travel and the Mayhem that comes with it. Here's the summary. At the age of 20, Izuku pulled a disappearing act, switched to being an underground hero, and took on a new identity more true to himself than he's ever been. He had to leave his class and everyone behind to do so, but he's hardly alone, being haunted by the ghosts of One for All and all that. Now he's 30 and living life to the fullest, saving lives, giving villains psychological damage, filling the HPSC building with crickets. Then, one quirk accident has him tossed back just over 15 years. Except due to the laws of time, this creates a brand new timeline, so any hope of returning is nil. Of course, he's not exactly in a hurry to leave. This is honestly the funniest thing to happen to him in years, and he's gonna milk it for all it's worth. Between conning his way into a job at UA, annoying his way into friendship with Eraserhead, and becoming a weird uncle to his teenage self via a comedy of errors, no one in this timeline is prepared for the chaos 30-year-old Izuku is about to bring to their lives. For better or for worse, this timeline will never be the same again. Chapter 1. Life was different than Izuku had pictured it would be as a kid. Different still than he pictured it would be as a teen. He hadn't lasted in the limelight world for long, just under 2 years at most. It's just not doable when strangers' first impression of him is that he's not all there in the head. It's a fair assumption to make with the way he openly talks to the One for All vestiges, regardless of who else is around, though a blatantly untrue assumption all the same. Truthfully, acting like he's missing some of his marbles is more or less just a bit in the same vein as Gran Torino pretending to be senile. In reality, Izuku is quite mentally sound, and was about as stable as someone who's been haunted by 7 ghosts for the past 15 years can be. When he'd quit the limelight shortly before he turned 20, he'd pulled a full disappearing act. One day he was there, and the next he was gone. His apartment emptied, and no trace left of where he'd gone. Oh, his old friends had looked. He'd knows they had. But they never found him. In their defense, it's not like he made it easy on them. He'd moved towns and switched to underground heroics, putting him in a completely different database. He also changed his hero name, his costume, the name of his quirk, and even his civilian name. Legally, he's Mikumo Shimura now. Plus, if there's one thing he's good at, it's not being found when he doesn't want to be. It took 5 years for him to run into anyone he used to know, and it ended up being Shouta Aizawa, aka Eraserhead of all people. They'd gotten paired for a series of missions, so they had no choice but to spend a lot of time together. Even so, he'd changed so much it took the Eraserhead months to figure out why he seemed somewhat familiar. They were very lucky they hadn't been on the clock when Shouta had finally given him the most flabbergasted look to ever cross the man's face and said, "Problem child," like a question, before Izuku had ended up dropping to the floor with how hard he'd started laughing. Once Izuku had finally stopped laughing, they ended up getting drinks so he could explain what was going on. "What happened, problem child?" Shouta had asked quietly. "And don't say nothing. You disappeared without telling anyone anything, and now 5 years later I ran into you by chance under a new identity. That's not nothing." "It's Mikumo Shimura now, not problem child," Izuku had corrected. "As for why, for starters, I'm haunted, which isn't a great look for the limelight, and, well, one day I just woke up and thought, aren't I tired of being nice? Don't I just want to go apeshit? So I took my chance and started over. The problem child sunshine boy you knew was a mask I wore because no one had ever accepted me as my genuine self, and I was desperate to be accepted, to have friends. But now the thought of doing that forever just sounds so exhausting? Boring! And yeah, exhausting too, but mostly it's suffocatingly boring," Izuku exclaimed. "I'm not saying everything was a lie, of course, but God, being pure and nice all the time is so dull. Thinking about loosening the bolts of Bakugo's desk was not nearly as fun as watching it collapse on him would have been. Being a good, perfect little hero who doesn't fight dirty is not as fun as using psychological warfare and public humiliation to drive villains to surrender. I don't want to be nice and perfect? I want to release exactly 5,273 crickets into the Hero Commission building. Shouta had taken a long, suffering sip of his drink. At least that explains the HPSC's cricket infestation. So, it was simple, really. His time away from everything had let him shed his baggage and left him free to just be without expectations. There's no more pretending or trying to please people. No hiding from negative emotions. He's not a sweet and innocent sunshine bean or whatever weird shit they had called him in high school, and he's most certainly not a symbol. That's why he changed both his civilian and hero names. They were too connected to everything he's been through, and to the person he tried so hard to pretend to be, so people would like him, so he'd be accepted. Being Mikumo was a fresh start, and so was being the hero he was now. The fact Izuku was no longer the person Shouta had taught so many years prior, aside from the lingering physical details, there was almost no resemblance. That's probably why it was so easy for them to become such good friends. He's not Izuku, or Problem Child, or Deku. He's Mikumo Shimura, also known as Underground Pro Hero Mayhem. It's different. He's different, and Shouta can acknowledge and accept that. He doesn't have as many people around him as he used to, sure, but he's happy. He's carefree. He's himself. Even if, to achieve that, it meant leaving Class A behind him, and Shouta understood. Your friends still miss you, Shouta had told him a few drinks in. They miss who they thought I was, Izuku had corrected with a laugh. They'd be horrified to know I laugh at people's bad karma, or that I send boxes of live spiders to people who piss me off. I'm vindictive, and petty, and curse like a motherfucker. I've even answered wrong number calls just to fuck with people. Shouta almost choked on his drink. You send live spiders to people? Bitch, I've been sending live spiders to people since I was 6, Izuku had cackled. The only reason I stopped during high school is because Mike would have made me go deaf for it. Putting a pin in that, Shouta chuckled. Are you planning to reconnect with any of your old classmates at all? Not really, Izuku had admitted. It's not that I don't care, but it's better for everyone this way. They won't have to question if everything was a lie, and I won't have to deal with people I care about not accepting me for me. Now, if they run into and want to be friends with Mikumo Shimura, then fine, but I won't be admitting who I was. Fair enough. I won't tell anyone either then. You deserve your happiness, Shouta had agreed before sporting one of his manic grins. Now, tell me more about this sending spiders to people thing. Everything is easy with Shouta, and in the 5 years since his identity reveal, Izuku would even go so far as to say they've become besties. Meanwhile, his old classmates have yet to figure out who he was, even though he's met a few of them in the years since Shouta figured it out. It's hilarious. Shouta understands and respects both his decision to leave and his choice not to reconnect with the class. He even made sure to keep viewing him as Mikumo even after learning the truth. Funnily enough, they worked so well together they even became hero partners. For once, life is good. Mayhem, what are you doing? Izuku looked up from where he was sitting with his feet dangling from the roof of a building and grinned. Eraser! Did you bring me jelly? Shouta sighed, but handed a jelly pack to Izuku before moving to sit beside him, immediately leaning on Izuku's shoulder entirely. You okay, Mikumo? It's weird seeing you sitting quietly without inevitably starting to argue with your 7 dead warriors. Izuku cackled, almost choking on his jelly in the process. That's fucking hilarious, Sho. Why do you always come up with the best things to call them? Shouta snorted. Outsider's perspective. Now what's on your mind? It's weird when you're too quiet. Just thinking about the moment you figured out who I was, and the talk when we got drinks after, Izuku replied. My 7 dead warriors are off playing tag right now. They'll come back when Nana's done winning. You mean when I had the biggest revelation of my life and you decided the proper response was to roll around on the dirty ground for 5 solid minutes laughing at me for it? Shouta replied flatly. A civilian approached me during that and asked if she wanted me to call an ambulance because she thought you might be having a stroke or something. It was fucking hilarious. It took you months to figure it out. Izuku snickered gleefully. Then you went and became my favorite person by respecting my decisions and new identity without a fight. I like you this way better anyway, Shouta shrugged, not even flinching when Izuku shooed something invisible away from him. I know! I'm just so much more fun now, Izuku grinned, head swiveling to track his 7 tag-alongs around the area. I meant more that you're so obviously happy this way, Shouta sighed. But yeah, you're more fun too. Haha, yes! I am the chaos! Izuku cheered before suddenly whipping his head to the right. Shut up, Yoichi! I can see you snickering, you coward! Shouta yawned and stretched. You want to go a bit farther or call it a night? Let me check! Izuku looked around a moment. Hey, Dana, Hike, see or sense anything? Shouta wants to go home and take a nappy. I'm not a toddler, Mikumo, Shouta grumbled. You just have too much energy. No, you're just an old, soon-to-be 45-year-old man, Izuku teased. Woe is you to be middle-aged. Hike suddenly appeared to his right, distracting him from whatever Shouta would have replied with. There's a kidnapping in progress 2 blocks down. Nana's waiting at the site. Kidnapping in progress 2 blocks down, Shouta repeated for Shouta as he pulled his gas mask and visor back on, LEDs immediately lighting up. Let's do this. Ready or not, here I come. At least your ghosts are useful, Shouta gave a nod. Meet you there, Mayhem. Izuku hopped up as green sparks lit up his body while Shouta stretched, joints popping. In seconds, Izuku was off like a shot. The LEDs in his black outfit turned off for the moment to allow him to blend into the night around him. Shouta followed behind him using his capture weapon and arrived on the rooftop bordering the alley shortly after Izuku, and waited a short few seconds while Izuku was clearly getting an update from a ghost. Injected with something. Wanted for quirk, small gang, 1 civilian. Information given, they dropped down together and engaged the fight. It should have been simple for 2 pro heroes. Knocking out a bunch of thugs was so natural for them, and they worked together so well it should have been easy. Unfortunately, the universe has a habit of complicating things out of nowhere, especially when civilians who aren't used to situations like this are involved. So when the villain who'd been hiding pulled out a gun and tried to shoot Izuku while his back was turned, the civilian had no way of knowing he could sense it and, in panic, tried to help. Her quirk ignored the bullet. Instead, it hit Izuku. The civilian went into shock as Izuku vanished. Shouta quickly finished off the last of the villains, including the shooter, as well as noting Mikumo was absent before approaching the civilian. He wasn't too worried about Mikumo being missing yet. After all, the man's got 7 invisible distractions to deal with, and this wouldn't be the first time he was let off track. Ma'am, are you hurt? No, they injected something into me, but I don't feel hurt or sick, the civilian said. Did you see where my partner went? He sometimes wanders, Shouta asked next. The civilian immediately burst into tears. I'm sorry, my quirk shouldn't work like that. It doesn't work on living things, I'm so sorry. Shouta suddenly had a terrible feeling. Later, in the police station, his feeling was confirmed. Tests had revealed the villains had put a mild form of trigger into the civilian they'd rescued, with intention of making her use her more powerful quirk to make some people disappear. The trigger wasn't powerful enough to make the quirk go crazy, just enough to increase what it could do to a major degree. The civilian herself had explained better once she'd calmed down. Shouta looked at her file. Name, Miki Hatsumura. Age, 20. Quirk, a different path. Description, she can sense small, non-living things back in time to a specific date up to 6 months in the past. Shouta looked from the file to Miki sitting across the table. So, based on the file, I assume you accidentally sent Mayhem back in time, then? Yes, Miki said. I saw him being shot at and panicked. I was only trying to send away the bullet, I promise you that. My quirk had never worked on living things, or anything larger than a notebook before, so I had no idea it would affect him. I'm very sorry. You're affected by trigger and getting kidnapped. I'm not holding it against you for not making sound decisions given the circumstances, Shouta assured. Your file doesn't say how long your quirk lasts. Can you elaborate? I'd like to know when I should be expecting my partner back. Shouta really doesn't like the way Miki grimaces. He won't be back, Miki stated apologetically. What do you mean, he won't be back? Shouta asked seriously, trying and not quite succeeding at keeping the panic out of his voice. Time follows a simple set of rules. Those being that the future is undecided, and the past can't be changed or destroyed. Time-related quirks cannot break these rules and must work around them instead. My quirk is called a different path because of the way it does that. Miki sighed sadly. When I send something back in time, it makes a new timeline starting from the point I sent it to. It doesn't ever come back to this one. I'm sorry. Shouta stared at her. What was he going to do without Mikumo? That man, at 30, Mikumo was hardly a child, and his ghosts were such a big part of his life now. What was he going to tell Eri when she calls him from college? She loved her Uncle Mikumo, as she dubbed him when he'd manifested in their lives. Shinso will be devastated, too. He got along with Mikumo's current identity like a house on fire. I'm sorry, Miki said again. I would have never used my quirk if I had known it would affect him. It's not your fault. You didn't know they'd done anything to affect your quirk, and... well, you shouldn't have used your quirk illegally. You were hardly thinking straight. Shouta took a breath. Do you know when Mayhem was sent back to? I didn't specify in my panic. I just wanted the bullet to go really far away. Normally I can only send things up to 6 months back, but with how much stronger my quirk was at the time, I can't say how far back he went, Miki explained. It's definitely more than a few years, though. Shouta nodded. And there's not going to be some paradox problem if he meets himself, right? Miki shook her head. No, he'll have started a timeline where there are meant to be 2 of him, so they can meet without repercussions. Well, then I guess all we can do is just wait for Mayhem to get bored, Shouta sighed. He'll find his way back here once the entertainment value runs out. Miki started uncertainly. That's not how it works. Shouta just shook his head. If anyone can figure out how to break the rules of time and space on a whim, it's Mayhem. Okay, maybe it's unrealistic to expect Mikumo to break the boundaries of time and space, but it's something he has to believe. Mikumo wouldn't forgive him if he gave up on him, or worse, his ability to create chaos too quickly, and he's not ready to have to mourn another friend just yet. Most of all, though, he just really hopes Mikumo is okay. Alright, yeah, who's he kidding? Mikumo will be just fine. His ability to adapt and thrive regardless of the situation is par to none. If anything, he'll probably find this whole thing hilarious. The new timeline, on the other hand, there's no way that is in any way, shape, or form prepared for the chaos Mikumo is about to bring to it. God rest their souls and pray they aren't scared of spiders. One second, Izuku was in an alley fighting villains. The next, he was in the same alley, but alone. Well, not entirely alone. He still has his ghosts, but they don't really count. He ignores N calling him rude for that. It looked a bit different than before, though he's fairly certain it's the same alley. Huh. Izuku wanders out of the alley looking around the city. That was the same, but different. At a corner store, he stops and picks up a leftover newspaper from the previous day. He blinks at the date before bursting into laughter, making the poor night shift cashier startle awake and stare at him with concern. He's in the past. Just over 15 fucking years in the past. Holy shit, Izuku cackles, clutching his stomach. This is the funniest shit to happen to me in ages. Yoichi leans over his shoulder. What are we gonna do now? Go to the police? Nah, that's boring, Izuku replied. The police are so dull. Fair, Yoichi agreed. We're better off finding someone with more entertainment value. I say we need to take advantage of not being in the system, Banjo countered, as he mimed sitting on top of a Pocky display. Imagine how many pranks we can pull. You do have a point. Izuku ignored the way the cashier stared at him as he looked at and talked to what they would see as thin air. Nana tapped her chin from half-face through a chip display. And we can't forget that being in the past, the Hero Commission building would be woefully free of crickets right now. I love how you're all enablers, Izuku said with a grin from behind his mask. So what's the plan? Anne asked, floating casually on Izuku's other side. We're going to the
Only rodent who will understand the entertainment value of the situation. Izuku replied, vibe turning manic. The only question now is, do we call first or just break in? The 7 ghosts exchanged equally managed looks. Let's break in!
Thanks for listening. All these readings are recorded live on my Discord every week. The intro and outro are recorded separately.